When people say cold email doesn't work, it usually means that they don't know how to make it work. The truth is that cold email books you sales calls just fine. But what has changed is that some of the tactics that used to be effective in the late teens and even up to 2023 now don't work anymore. And in this video, I'm going to reveal the 3 principles how you can make cold email work for you and how I have turned around the performance of my own cold emails from a 0.05% call booking rate to a 5% call booking rate. So that's 100x improvement. And I did this when I implemented one fundamental change. My name is Michael Bohannes, and I help B2B consultants build scalable client acquisition systems and stop depending on referrals. And cold email is one of our best methods to book sales calls. But to tell you how we achieve this dramatic improvement, let me go over to screen share, because reading while listening at the same time makes you retain more information. So I first started dabbling with cold email in 2021, and I was sending large volumes of personalized emails. And when I say personalized, I mean that I had a virtual assistant in the Philippines look at their profile and search for something interesting about them, and then mention it in the first line. Something like, "Hi, John, I noticed you're from Baltimore. Go Ravens." Or, "Hi, Susan, I noticed on LinkedIn that you started Susan Consulting 4 years ago and have worked with mid-sized manufacturing companies. Congratulations on your success." And then came the pitch. And strangely enough, these emails somehow worked. I booked roughly 1 call out of 300 emails sent. And it worked for a few months, when towards the end of 2021, performance started dropping to a level where I started questioning the viability. At some point, I believe, I don't remember it exactly, but I think performance fell to 1 call booked out of 2,000 emails sent. So it was pretty bad. And you might remember that was also the time when text-based AI tools started to become more prevalent. It wasn't quite the time of ChatGPT yet, but tools that could scan a LinkedIn page or website were available and were decent at extracting a few options for the first lines. So the first line personalizations that my virtual assistants in the Philippines were doing started to be replaced by AI tools, which means that it was much easier to do them. And when things get easier, it means that more people are doing it, which also means the tactic becomes less effective. Now, people were receiving Go Ravens emails 5 times a day. So I had to come up with something better. And that was when I started experimenting with video. I bought a coaching program that taught me how to use personalized videos inside cold emails. And after tinkering with it and applying a few improvements to it, I came up with a system that gives me a consistent 5% appointment booking rate. And the ROI on this activity is pretty insane. For every 8 hours worked on my end, I close $10,000 and I pay about $100 in client acquisition cost. And if I outsource the whole thing, I pay anywhere between $500 and $1,000 to acquire $10,000 worth of business. So that's a 10 to 20x ROI. And I'm not saying this to brag, although why not? But more important is that it took me quite a while to get there. Remember, I started this 3 years ago, and only in the last few months, I have refined my methodology to a point where I get these very high ROIs. Which goes to the first point I made. When people say that cold email doesn't work, it means that they don't know how to make it work, because it simply takes time. So cold email does work. Now, I'm not going to reveal exactly how we do it, because we reserve that for our clients, but I'm going to share with you the principles that underlie the system. You can then make it work based on these principles. And the great upside here is that if you heed those principles, you're very unlikely to face the kind of decline in performance that I had in 2021, because what I did back then, the Go Ravens stuff, that was a gimmick. It was a tactic that becomes less and less effective the more people copy it. However, the principles that I'm going to share with you are extremely unlikely to stop working, even if more people use them. And the reason is simple. They take work. You cannot fake it. You can try to fake it, but people always see through it. So let's get into them. Principle 1 is personalization, but actual genuine personalization. And the more of it, the better. There's this guy I met recently who spends literally 3 full days personalizing a cold email, and he's selling to billion-dollar privately held companies. So it's the payoff that he gets is considerably is quite high, of course. And he spends 1 of those 3 days himself, and 2, he pays virtual assistants or researchers to research a lot about this company and to compile the stuff into a prefabricated document that he has for these purposes. And what he then does is that he composites. This is how he spends his 1 day. He takes that research. And by the way, the research they do includes even talking to the ideal target customer of that prospect. So they go that far. They do 5 interviews with prospects of their prospect or customers of their prospect. For example, they did a study on how the brand of the prospect is perceived by a specific niche that they found out that this company wants to get into and wants to grow in. So it's like incredible levels of personalization. And Of course, it is not terribly scalable. That's an extreme case because at some point it's his time that he requires. But it is, of course, also very effective because with this cold email approach, he hooks people who otherwise would not be approachable via cold email. And he closes deals on that. And those deals have usually the size of between $150,000 and $200,000. So, of course, for this kind of level of deal, it makes a lot of sense. Now, how much effort should you put in? Where do you draw the line, right? You cannot be doing this kind of 3 days personalization if your average customer lifetime value is, let's say, $5,000 or $10,000. So here's what I would recommend that you do. Assume a 2% call booking rate, 5% if you're being optimistic, and then a 20% call conversion rate. And juxtapose that with your expected customer lifetime value and ask yourself, well, is that worth it? If I customize something for 10 minutes, I spend 10 minutes on each prospect. Is that worth it? I assume a 2% call booking rate. So 10 minutes times 50, and I'm going to get a call. Okay. So that's 500 minutes to get one call, and then a 20% call conversion rate. So I have to expect a 500 times 5, 2,500 minutes to get one client. Is that worth my time? Okay. And you juxtapose it with the likely payout, and then you do it or not. And then you can try to find maybe a slightly more efficient personalization method. Okay. But that is the kind of exercise to do when you want to know, well, how much should I be personalizing? And to get into more details, please watch this video, how much should it cost to win a B2B consulting client? Because there I break this down in much more detail. And principle one is the one big change that I implemented that has moved my appointment booking rate from 1 out of 2,000 to 1 out of 20 these days. So 100x improvement. And that, of course, is considerable. And if you're interested, my personalization takes about 5 minutes. So principle 2 is having a good offer. Promise a specific outcome to the prospect and back it up with some form of guarantee, ideally a money back guarantee, something that suggests that you have skin in the game as well and not just them. For example, I just now spoke to one of my clients, and one of the concerns that his prospects have is that, I'm going through agency after agency. So he's a fractional CMO, and his clients are frustrated with the fact that they pay agencies and then there's no results. Now, that is a specific pain point that you can address and counter that by saying, listen, if we do not at least make your money back within 90 days of working with us, you don't pay us. We don't want to be perceived like these other agencies who just take your money and then say, well, it didn't work. Okay. And so that is one way of differentiating yourself. Okay. I know it sounds a bit intimidating when you think, oh, I would have to return the money if I don't get them a result. Well, that keeps you on your toes. You better deliver some value. Okay. So think about what kind of money back guarantee or any other form of guarantee you can provide. Good. And another concept that I recently came across is to swap out an outcome for an infrastructure. That's quite interesting. Many people tend to think, okay, I would love to have some form of ad system in place. I would love to have, let's say, Facebook ads in place. I know how to do this. I have some people who know how to do this, but I'd like to ultimately run it myself. But just the setting it up, it's just very intimidating. That is another way, and I see this being talked about more and more. Instead of outcomes, that is like, we promise you 100K in new revenue. That's fine. It still books us calls, but especially for slightly more sophisticated clients, when you know that they would love to do whatever new TikTok ads, for example, you create an infrastructure for them. You create an infrastructure for them where they have both people and tools in place that they just now, you hand it over, like a key to a newly built house, and they can just sit down in the chair and start working on it. They have to learn the bells and whistles, but it works. Try that. Maybe selling an infrastructure could also be an interesting variant on the offer. But I haven't tried this myself. I just came across it, so I just wanted to share it with you. Then principle 3 is to give something genuinely valuable away, but not an ebook of yours. Okay. This is not valuable. I came across someone who has access to leads at such a low price that they can offer 5,000 leads to anyone who books a call with them. And that's basically just email addresses. Okay. And so it cost them $25 to get 5,000 leads. And that is a valuable enough offer that people are willing to have a call with them, and it costs them relatively little. Imagine if you just close 1 out of 10 clients and then you've spent $250 to get one client, it's a pretty good deal. Okay. This principle, however, is a little bit tricky since you're likely to book calls with freeloaders. It's a little bit like bribing people with money to do sales calls. However, do notice the disparity of cost versus perceived benefit. It's only because they have access to leads at such a low price, which comes from the territory. This is somebody who runs a cold email agency, and they have this outrageously good pricing because they buy these leads in a huge bulk. And so for them, it costs them very little, and the perceived value, like 5,000 leads, okay, that's quite nice. Okay, so that's an interesting one as an alternative to the ultra personalization. However, I do believe this still can be effective because not everyone is a psychopath, and Cialdini's reciprocity principle still applies. So in case you haven't read Cialdini's book, Influence, he talks about reciprocity. And if you give something to somebody, they are likely to reciprocate, and not everybody will just take it and say, all right, I don't need your services, thanks for the leads, and buy. Some people will, but I still think that it could be a valuable and useful strategy. Now, if you can activate 1 or even 3 of those principles and can tinker with the system for a couple of months or maybe even years, then I'm very confident you can make cold email work for you as well. Or you just sign up with us and then we can give you our system to implement. And if you don't want to do that, just watch the next video, how much should it cost to win a B2B consulting client, so that you can put the effort that it will take to get that client into proper context.